Good afternoon, everybody, once again. We're here now for the closing session of our Life on the Breadline End of Project conference. We've had a very full and challenging and hopefully positive and constructive 2 days. And what we want to do now over the next 20 to 30 minutes is to bring that to a close. And we're going to do two things. And firstly, Stephanie will talk to us a little bit about the sessions that we have shared in over the last 2 days. And then she will hand over to me to talk a little bit about some of the actions that we would like to invite you to consider taking in the days and months and years to come. Over to you, Stephanie.
Thank you, Chris. So I'm going to try and give us a whistle-stop tour of all of the sessions that we've had over the last 2 days. But first, I would like to thank everyone that has been at the conference, contributed to the conference, and particularly Gwyneth and Imogen for all your support with the Zoom call and making sure that that's all run smoothly. So thank you very much. So we've had a mixture of presentations, guest speakers, and workshops over the last 2 days. And I'm going to go through now the images that our scribe Katie has drawn for us. Thank you very much, Katie, for doing this as a visual summary of what we've got. So it seems like a long time ago now, but yesterday morning we started the conference with Chris and myself talking about austerity and poverty in the UK, how this has changed over the last 10 years. And then Chris gave us some of our headline findings, which emphasised that poverty ultimately needs to be seen as morally unacceptable if change is going to happen. So we need a bold, intersectional and multidisciplinary theology that challenges unjust structures. We then heard from Peter Scott talking about the theology of poverty and the poverty of theology. Peter raised questions such as, when is poverty poverty? What actually is poverty? And he spoke to us using Gustavo Gutierrez and Leonardo Boff to talk about different ways of understanding poverty, including spiritual poverty and solidarity with the poor, ultimately ending up with an ecclesiology of poverty. We then heard from Life on the Breadline's Robert Beckford talking about the Black Church, Black theology and austerity. And Robert questioned why some Black churches and groups haven't really been aware of austerity. And he looked at that through historical austerity and through the African Caribbean work ethic and through kincraft. We then had the first of our workshops, which was a World Cafe workshop in which many of you took part as a way of trying to recreate some of that networking that if we had been able to meet in person, if it weren't for the pandemic, some of those conversations that we might have had over a cup of tea or over lunch. So in small groups, we discussed what brings you to the conference, what are some examples of poverty and austerity in your local community, how are faith groups responding to poverty and austerity in your local community, and finally, how would you like to see your local community change in the future? Our second workshop yesterday, Chris and I looked at how we've researched poverty during Life on the Breadline, how we've combined interviews with national church leaders, an online survey with regional leaders, and 6 case studies. And then we talked about some of the challenges of researching poverty, how to do that sensitively, what language can be used, and the strengths of an ethnographic approach. And we then had breakout rooms where practitioners, church leaders and academics came together in different groups to talk about some of the challenges and opportunities in researching poverty. We then ended yesterday with our guest speaker, Naomi Maynard. Thank you again, Naomi. Naomi spoke to us about how, having attended the Life on the Breadline workshop back in 2019, she was challenged at the end of that workshop, along with everyone else who took part, what change were we going to make in relation to structural injustice. So Naomi talked about different experiences of austerity, and then how she and others in her local community have been working to tackle food poverty, in particular establishing a local pantry. That brings us on to this morning, where Anthony Reddy gave us our second guest talk, where he looked at the different historic notions of the deserving and undeserving poor and some of the challenges that come with that, talking about solidarity and concluding with that we need our praxis to be in line with our voting and our ethics. So a challenge from Anthony there. Chris then presented this morning on some of the work that he's been carrying out with Notting Hill Methodist Church in the shadow of Grenfell Tower. Talked about the octopus of poverty. We've got the octopus in the centre of the screen there, and how poverty is a form of violence and the housing injustice that people have experienced. I then spoke about food banks, which has been another of our case studies, looking at how people's experiences of food banks and the atmospheres of food banks are formed by clients and volunteers of food banks, and how that's changed over the last decade of austerity. Robert then this afternoon brought us a workshop on austerity, intersectionality and youth crime, where we watched Robert's film that he's made as part of Life on the Breadline of the Swords into Ploughshares. We just had a workshop on asset-based community development with Al, Paul, and Sarah and Claire, who are two of our street connectors, where we learned about an approach that focuses on assets and gifts rather than deficits. And that brings us full circle. We've just heard from Chris launching the Life on the Breadline Anti-Poverty Charter, and reflections from Deacon Eunice Atwood on that. Thank you, Eunice. So that was a whistle-stop tour of the last 2 days. I'm now going to hand over to Chris for ending with some takeaway actions from this conference.
Thank you very much indeed, Stephanie. I'd like to add my thanks to yours, to every one of you who has joined us for one session, one day, or the whole of the last 2 days as we've met together. I'd like to thank everyone who has spared the time to share their thoughts and reflections with us, our guest speakers, Naomi and Anthony, our guests from the Firs and Bromford Estate, Al and Paul and Sarah and Claire. And in particular, I would like to thank Stephanie for all the work that she's done behind the scenes, organising the conference, and Gwyneth and Imogen for making sure that everything has worked so brilliantly over the last couple of days. Thank you to everyone. My hope is that Life on the Breadline will stimulate further action in the months and years to come. Life on the Breadline as a formal research project comes to an end in 2 months' time, but the work that we have started over the last 3 years has just begun. It's become clear in conversations over the last 2 days that we could be working on Life on the Breadline, not just for another 2 months or even just for another 2 years, but for the next 10 years as the project has developed and more challenges and possibilities have begun to emerge. We need to kind of focus our energies now in the last few months of the project. And so we want to encourage you to work with us to enhance the impact that our Life on the Breadline research has on the work of the church, locally, regionally, and nationally as it challenges poverty, on the work of policymakers to enable them to be more effective in the development of social policy that challenges the structural injustice that feeds into the daily experience of poverty. We want together to make that difference that Dietrich Bonhoeffer calls us to make when he calls us to ram a spoke into the wheel of injustice. And in order to do that, we want as a project team to support you and to work alongside partners such as Church Action on Poverty, our project partner, our case study partners in Birmingham, London and Manchester, Hodge Hill, B30, Inspire, Church Action on Poverty, as I've mentioned, Power the Fight and Notting Hill Methodist Church to continue the work that we have begun. We'd like to encourage you to engage with the Anti-Poverty Charter on the Life on the Breadline website. I'm pleased to say that even though the launch of the Anti-Poverty Charter took place less than 10 minutes ago, we've already had several congregations signing up to become Anti-Poverty Charter congregations. Thank you, and we look forward to working with more and more congregations as the days and weeks and months pass. We're also, in the next month or so, putting some of what we've talked about today together into a really impressive photographic exhibition. So the Life on the Breadline photographic exhibition profiles the work that's going on in the 6 case studies that we've referred to over the last 2 days. The exhibition, which is quite spectacular, is going to be hosted at Coventry Cathedral between the 3rd and the 28th of July. If you are in or near Coventry, and if COVID restrictions allow, please do visit the cathedral, but register first on the Life on the Breadline website in order to do that, so that the cathedral can monitor the numbers of people coming to look at the exhibition. We hope in the future to take that exhibition on tour, but if you're near Coventry, now's your chance to come and have a look at what's been going on in the case studies that we've been working on since 2018. Whilst you're on the website, check out our other resources. Some are already there, lots and lots of things on the website for you to look at, reflect on, read, watch, download and use to resource action to end poverty locally. Keep an eye out for our very detailed report for policymakers, which is currently with the printer and should be ready very soon. Hot on its heels will be an affirming but also challenging report for church leaders. And don't forget to download our Lent course and use that in your church together with the Anti-Poverty Charter to think about how you can contextualize action to end poverty, to challenge poverty where you are. Share reflections about Life on the Breadline research, our conference, the actions that we're proposing in our Anti-Poverty Charter. If you're on social media, do use the hashtag Breadline Research. I want to end by saying just a word or two about the project that we've been part of. Stephanie, Robert, Peter and I are committed as individuals and as a project team to developing research that resources people in churches and community groups across the land working for social justice, working to challenge structural injustice, working to meet the needs of people experiencing poverty. We're committed to developing academic research that can enable people who are engaged in that ongoing struggle. We want to work together as the project comes to an end, and hope and trust that we will continue to collaborate in the months to come. Life on the Breadline is an important academic project, the first academic theology project of its kind that has analysed the nature, scope and impact of Christian action on poverty in the UK since the 2008 financial crash. It's a project that is intended to resource progressive social change. So watch this space. Join us as an anti-poverty charter congregation. Commit yourself again, as I know you will, to working to end poverty locally where you are. Thank you for sharing with us, and all the best. We hope to work with you and continue to struggle alongside you in the months and years to come. Thank you very much indeed.